The enemy city smells like metal and rain, as if someone just cleaned a weapon but didn't bother to put it away. They call Sarana a fortress, but it's really a fist of stone clenching a cliff. Oil and iron slick the air. Banners of the Talvar pack hang like flayed shadows off every watchtower, each stitch a warning. We own this sky. We decide who breathes beneath it. I arrive in the back of a military truck, wrists free but future-bound, a black metal collar cool against my throat. They've etched one word into it, guest, as if calligraphy could make captivity polite. Wind muscles past us and drags the smell of machine grease through the slats. It coats the tongue like a lie you're forced to swallow. The truck brakes. Boots. Thud. The canvas flap peels up, and daylight slices the dim in two. Out, a soldier says. I move, because stillness is how prey gets measured. I move because if I pretend this is my choice long enough, my body might believe me. Stone underfoot, water roaring somewhere below the cliff, and a crowd of Talvar lining the narrow avenue that leads deeper into their city. No one jeers. No one throws rotten things. They do something worse. They watch me in silence, calculation perched in their pupils, a collective pause before a strike. A woman with a scar that crawls from brow to cheek holds her son's shoulder and shifts him behind her, the way you do when a dog you don't know enters the room. A door must always swing both ways, my mother used to say. They're showing me theirs, respect without welcome. A man steps out from the long line of uniforms waiting for me. He wears authority like a habit he can't break. Broad shoulders, stance that's found its equilibrium in too many storms. His hands are scarred the way cliffs are, history written in jagged, honest lines. His hair's cropped tight, his eyes would be brown if suspicion weren't always darkening them. Jude, someone murmurs behind him, and the word skims the crowd like a warning. So that's him, head of security, war made. The pack's blunt instrument wrapped in self-control. Jude's gaze lands on the collar first, then on me. Lael. He makes my name sound like a weight he's testing in his palm. I meet his eyes because I am not a thing you look around. Welcome to Sarana, he says, and the corner of his mouth twitches, not with humor, but with the effort of dragging a civil word across a battlefield. Thank you for your hospitality. My voice is even. If it's a blade, it's one left in its sheath. Not a threat yet, but the promise of one. Protocol sighs around us. 2 soldiers flank me, and Jude turns. I'm expected to follow 3 steps behind, like a shadow with a performance review. Sarana's streets are carved from mountain and stubbornness. The buildings lean as if listening for trouble. Every so often a gust brings the faint, animal scent of fear, fur and salt, claw and caution, threaded through the oil and rain. Talvar pride, Talvar vigilance, even their silence is drilled. We pass a square where a fountain tries and fails to make the rock look soft. The water smells clean, a rare mercy. A child breaks from his mother's grip and stares at me unabashed. Why's he got that? He asks, pointing at my collar. So you remember what keeps the peace, the mother snaps, but her voice wavers like a banner in crosswind. Jude's jaw shifts. He doesn't rebuke her. He doesn't correct the child either. He keeps walking, and the crowd peels away, their quiet trailing after us like smoke. The council chamber is a room that pretends not to be a cell, high windows, long table, the weight of too many decisions ground into the grain. A row of elders in gray weight, like winter personified. The ranking one, sharp cheekbones, eyes like a ledger, lifts his chin. Guest Lael, he says, and the title tastes wrong on him. Welcome. The treaty's terms are clear. You will remain here under protection and observation until the next moon's turning. You will abide by our laws. You will not approach the border. You will refrain from... He glances at a paper. Incitements. I allow myself a small, careful smile. I didn't realize breathing counts as incitement here. A ripple travels the line of elders, irritation pretending to be dignity. The leader's mouth hardens. Security Chief Jude will oversee your accommodations. He is to ensure the treaty's integrity is not compromised. Chief? Jude steps forward, every inch the obedient weapon. Yes. A's eyes flick to me, then back to the man. Orders? Watch him. Do not engage. If he dies, you answer for it. The room goes even quieter. They want me alive, but only to keep their fiction breathing. When a lie is fragile, you protect it like a holy thing. Yes, Jude says, and the way he says it tells me he has said yes to 1,000 things that curdled in his gut. He turns to me. You'll be housed in the eastern wing. Dining is communal. You will keep curfew. You will not wander unescorted. I hear your hospitality comes with a map and a leash, I say. Efficient. If he were the kind of alpha who needed to prove himself with volume, he'd bark now. He isn't. He is the kind who calculates whether patience saves more lives than pride. We'll go, Jude says, and his hand not quite gestures toward the door. He doesn't touch me. He doesn't have to. The soldiers do the touching for him, palms hovering near weapons, the choreography of distrust. The Eastern Wing used to be a monastery or a prison. The difference is only intention. My room is clean in the way a hospital is clean. Wiped of anything that could anchor a person in place. A narrow bed, a window, a metal wardrobe, a cross of sunlight trying to do something kind on a floor that doesn't deserve it. Jude does a brisk perimeter glance, as if the walls might have developed new sins while he was away. He nods to the soldiers. They file out. It's just the two of us and the hiss of rain dragging itself down the glass. You'll eat in the hall at second bell, he says. There's a code for the door. He recites it. Don't share it, because I have so many friends here. Something like a smile ghosts across his face, barely born before it dies. Don't make any, he says. Your council prefers me isolated. My council prefers the treaty intact. And you? He's quiet long enough that I hear the rain deciding which eaves to choose. I prefer preventable things not becoming funerals, he says, and leaves before I can decide whether that's compassion or policy. The dining hall is a long spine of noise. Bowls clatter, voices stack, the smells are an argument, stewed meat, smoke, the salty heat of too many bodies trying to forget they used to be enemies. I collect a tray. Thick stew glistens like river mud. A heel of bread sweats steam. The communal pot breathes next to a rack of ladles, each with a handle, polished by 100 hands that believed they belonged here. I stop. I'm not picky. I've eaten worse in places that loved me, but there's a stubborn steel blue line inside me that won't bend for spectacle. Not today. Not for them. An older soldier stops opposite me, ladle poised. Problem? I lift my tray, light as a shield. I don't eat with people who might decide tomorrow I'm a clerical error in their treaty. It is not a shout. It is not a challenge. It is a surgical strike of courtesy. For a heartbeat, the hall pauses, as if someone has drawn a blade across the noise to see what silence is made of. Jude appears like storms do. No herald, just pressure. He stands at my shoulder, a vertical line of disapproval that other people mistake for anger until it saves their life. You'll eat, he says. I'll eat, I agree. I won't pretend. His gaze doesn't move from my face. You refusing the communal pot can be read as contempt, then read it as self-preservation. I tilt my head, as if we're debating whether. You can sit me in the middle of your wolves, Chief. You can strap a word around my throat and call it mercy, but you don't get to make me share salt with a room that voted for my collar. Across the hall, a chair scrapes. The air stitches itself with tension. Jude's eyes narrow, some equation finishing in his mind. Bring him a separate portion, he says to the kitchen runner without looking away from me. From the small pot, the runner sputters, looks at the senior cook, who looks at Jude, who is very good at being obeyed without raising his voice. A moment later, a bowl lands in front of me. The stew here is a shade darker and smells faintly of rosemary, discipline, and someone's attempt at kindness. I pick up the spoon. I meet Jude's gaze again, a glance like the edge of a coin flipping in the sun. Thank you, I say. Chief. He nods once, approval withheld, catastrophe averted, and walks away. The hum of the hall returns, a little too hearty, the way people laugh more loudly after a close call. The stew tastes fine. The bread is honest. I eat until my hands stop shaking. Night takes Sarana by the throat early. The rain hunkers down, decides to belong. I stand at the small window in my room and watch the border glow under its necklace of floodlights. A pale fence of light carved across the dark, like a scar that someone keeps trying to reopen. Somewhere beyond, my pack inhales, exhales, obeys, rebels. Somewhere beyond, people tuck children into beds that used to be barracks and insist that treaties make good lullabies. I lift my fingers to the glass. The collar sits heavy, a punctuation mark interrupting whatever I might have said next. There's a scent riding the rain now, faint and sharp. The ghost of powder, the ghost of a choice. Every truce smells like this, as if someone already picked the place where the first spark will fall. Morning in Sarana wakes like a drill sergeant. Too early, too loud. Bells thump the stone spine of the fortress, and the corridors fill with the practical thunder of boots. I'm escorted nowhere because I haven't asked to go anywhere, so I go somewhere on purpose. The training hall for alphas is a stone hangar pretending to be a cathedral. Sweat, leather, oil, and the iron tang of intention make the air heavy. Racks of weapons line one wall, the other bristles with climbing ropes and rings. Sunlight filters through high slits, striping the floor like claw marks. This is not a place for guests. That's why I walk in. Conversation falters. Two sparring pairs break apart with a snort of annoyance that isn't about me, until it is. A tall alpha, with shoulders like a gate, swings toward me, eyes traveling. From my face to the black collar at my throat, and back again. He never bothers to hide his smile. "Lost, pup?" he says, the word pup seasoned with contempt and curiosity in equal measure. I take another step onto their floor as if onto a stage. No. He closes the distance in a handful of long strides. Then, "You're trespassing." His hand comes up and, quicker than most people breathe, hooks a finger under the edge of my collar to tug. The reflex is older than contracts. My hand shoots up and clamps his wrist before he can make a spectacle of it. We stop there, not moving, two animals deciding whether this is a test or a fight. "Don't," I say quietly. He grins wider, and the others grin with him because confidence is a contagious disease. Don't what? Touch the leash? Confuse the label for the man. That's when momentum takes over. The kind that fills rooms like this, that makes hierarchy into a sport. The alpha twists his wrist and jerks, trying to unbalance me. The tug yanks the collar tight against my pulse, and heat flashes. In the corners of my vision, anger, yes, but not the kind he wants. Enough. The word drops from above like a weight. Heads turn. On the narrow gallery that runs along the hall, Jude stands with his hands resting on the railing. He's been watching. Of course he has. He carries watching the way others carry knives. "Chief," the alpha says, not letting go, because his audience is still here. "Just guiding our guest back to the proper yard." Jude descends the stairs with the steady practicality of a man who has brought worse situations to heal. He doesn't hurry, the room hurries around him. By the time he reaches us, the training pairs have given him a clear circle. He stops inside it and looks first at the alpha's hand on my collar, then at me, then back at the hand. "Release him," Jude says. The silence hums. You can hear the small things, rope creaking, the distant ring of a dropped carabiner. Someone's breath hitching when they realize this might be about to get interesting. The alpha's jaw tightens. He doesn't belong here. He belongs wherever the treaty doesn't forbid, Jude replies. Voice flat. Your hand doesn't belong where it is. The alpha lets go, not because he's convinced, but because you don't pick the fight you can't win in front of your friends. He takes a theatrical step back, tosses me a look that promises we'll finish this somewhere less public, and mutters, "My mistake, Chief." Jude's attention shifts to me, and for a second, I think he's going to tell me to leave like a good little rule breaker. Instead, he says, "You're done here. Walk with me." It's not a request, but then, nothing that matters is. We move into the corridor, out of the hall's breath. Jude stops where the light knifes across the floor. He keeps enough distance that our bodies aren't a conversation all by themselves. "Are you looking for death?" he asks, voice so even it almost passes for calm. "No," I say. "I'm looking for a reaction." A tiny muscle in his cheek agrees that honesty can be a knife. "You almost got a broken jaw." "From him?" I tilt my head toward the hall. If he'd actually meant to hurt me, he would have used his fist, not my collar. Don't rely on what men should do. Rely on what they do when watched. You were watching. The double edge of that hangs between us. He shifts his weight, and for a breath, we're two people on a ledge neither of us chose. Apologize, he says. For what? For violating their space and baiting a fight. I look him directly in the eyes. He doesn't look away. This is not about dominance. It's about expectations slammed against principles until sparks bleed out. No, I say. The word is soft. A held line can be quiet. He exhales once, as if he'd expected nothing better and nothing worse. There are places in Sarana you can't go. So far everyone keeps telling me that like it's going to sound different the fifth time. Stay out of the Alpha Hall. I'll consider your advice. He huffs. It could be the ghost of a laugh if his day were less shaped like a grindstone. Consider this. Some of them want a reason. Don't give them one. Is that policy or compassion? Preventable funerals, he says again, and angles away. Chief, I call after him. He stops. Waits. You could discipline him for grabbing the collar of a treaty guest. I will, Jude says without turning. In private. Public discipline breeds public grudges. He looks over his shoulder then, eyes catching mine. You're not the only one who understands reactions. He walks off, leaving me with the echo of a corridor that has seen too much. The fortress lives on maps. You can tell a place by how often its inhabitants measure it. After midday, I find a wall-sized plan of Sarana in an administrative alcove. The map is a patient thing. Neat lines for corridors, darker ones for walls that won't yield to anything but siege. The border is a thin ribbon of ink pretending to be more than light on fences. I study the routes patrols take, clockwork that almost convinces you it's infallible. The gaps aren't where you think. They're in the places routine has scrubbed invisible. Ramps behind storage sheds, roof lines that offer cover, a waterway culvert that probably sounds like a dragon when it rains hard. My reflection ghosts in the glass over the map, collar, breath, a man who refuses to be reduced to either. You planning decor changes? Jude again. He leans against the doorframe with casualness so deliberate it's practically armor. He's taken his jacket off. The rolled sleeves show scars laddering his forearms, pale against sun-brown skin. An inventory of choices that healed, but didn't forget. I'm planning not to get lost, I say. In case of what? In case of anything. I tap a finger against a stairwell that touches 3 levels. Your architects prefer funnels to choices. That's one way to defend a choke point. That's one way to create panic. He steps closer to the map. Close enough that I feel the temperature of him. But not so close we become a different story. You see things most people miss. I have practice looking for cages. He looks at me. There's no pity in it, thank all the gods that failed us. Just assessment. Stay away from the culverts, he says. When it storms, they take whatever isn't bolted down. Good thing I'm not bolted. Yet, he says, and leaves the yet hanging there like a curtain he refuses to drop. Night again. Sarana's rain has moods, tonight's is impatient. It rattles the windows like a child shaking a gift. I sit on the edge of the bed and listen to the fortress collect itself. To the way stone tells you where the people inside it are moving. Something is wrong a second before I know what it is. The hairs along my arms lift, my pulse picks up, and a scent ghosts under the door. Fear, sharp and bitter. The kind that rolls off a body when it's convinced it's already too late. I rise. Cross the room. The latch is secure, but the window, small, deep set, wears a glittering necklace of glass on the sill where one pane has spidered and given up. The curtains stir. Cold air slaps my face. Outside, a narrow ledge runs along the wall like an invitation for the unforgivable. Footprints on the stone of the sill. Bare, small, not mine. I don't move for a long breath. Then another. I let the fear pheromone do what it will to my blood chemistry and wait for my mind to name what my body already knows. Someone came here panicked and left the way panic teaches you to flee, fast, dumb, toward the nearest edge. My door opens without knocking. Jude fills the frame, rain in his hair. his breathing edged. He takes in the window, the glass, the prints, and the way I'm standing with my hands at my sides, like a man who has decided that flinching is a language he won't speak. Report, he says, training snapping over his voice. Someone was here, I answer. They weren't here for me. He moves to the window and looks down into the dark slice of the alley 3 floors below, where rain chains the world together. He doesn't swear, which tells me he's already spent today's allotment of profanity. Patrols saw a junior runner bolt from the east passage, he says. She should never have been in this wing. He touches the cracked pane with 2 fingers, then the sill. She cut through. Heard footsteps. Panicked. Or someone taught her to fear this corridor, I say. Or that. He turns to me, reading the room the way I read maps. The air between us smells like rain, and the metallic edge of adrenaline wearing off. You didn't try to leave. I am exactly where you left me, I say. You, on the other hand, just taught me your key opens my door without announcing itself. Observation noted, he says dryly. We stand there, listening to the rain choose its own orders. He glances at the footprints again. We'll find her. You'll scold her for using a corridor meant for ghosts. I'll ask why she thought she needed it. I nod, and the movement feels like setting something heavy down. The window looks like an exit and a threat. The room smells like fear that isn't mine and resolve that is. You alphas, I say at last. And my voice is not unkind. You always think you can keep us in cages. Jude doesn't bristle. Maybe he's too tired for reflexes. And you? I'm just checking how thick the bars are, I say, and finally look at him fully. So I know which ones are painted on. His mouth almost curves. Don't bark, Lael. Was that an order? A suggestion, he says. Save your teeth. For what? For when you actually need to bite, he answers, and the rain, like an audience, applauds the line against the stone. Jude's office sits at the end of a corridor that never bothers with sunlight. The door is scarred in the way his hands are. Function first, history second. Inside, the room is a study in discipline. A heavy desk, an old map of the border, pinned under glass, an oil and iron tang from the weapons cabinet in the corner. 2 chairs face the desk, like well-trained dogs. There's nothing soft to catch on. The room is shaped to stop conversations from pretending they're anything but work. I arrive escorted by no one and all my quiet habits. Also, by the vent cover tucked under my arm. Jude looks up. His gaze does the count. Collar, hands, object, intent. So quickly you'd miss the math if you blinked. You brought evidence to your own interrogation, he says. I brought the part I removed so you wouldn't accuse a ghost, I reply, setting the grill gently on his desk. Consider it a professional courtesy. He studies the piece. Dust smears the metal in grayish fingerprints. The screws jangle in my palm because I haven't decided whether to keep them as souvenirs. The office smells like oil, dust, and the faint citrus he uses to keep the leather from cracking. Order, bottled. Sit, he says. I sit. The chair doesn't complain. He remains standing. A deliberate imbalance so the room remembers who belongs to which wall. You were found in the East Archive corridor, halfway up a service ladder. He begins. Voice level. You were removing ventilation covers along a route that leads, eventually, to the roofline above the council wing. Explain. You just did. His eyes are not amused. Explain why. Air moves in straight lines when it can, I say. People don't. The vents link places the halls pretend don't. I wanted to see how your fortress breathes. His mouth makes a brief, unwilling shape that might be respect. And what did you learn? That Serana exhales where she thinks no one's listening. I answer. That your patrols are loud on the hour and lazy on the quarter. That the East Wing was designed by someone who loved symmetry more than sense. And that if smoke ever fills those ducts, your funnel stare will turn into a flue. You were mapping an escape. I was mapping truth, I say, tired of the pretense that one can exist without the other. He leans back against the desk, close enough to the vent cover that his finger leaves a clean slash through dust. You could have been arrested. You asked me to save my teeth for when I needed them, I say. I'm testing where a bite lands. On my patience, he returns, but the edge doesn't cut. The council wants a charge sheet. Tampering, reconnaissance, intent. Intent is a matter of story, I say, and the fatigue in my voice surprises us both. Theirs is simple. The treaty holds because we are civilized. The story I can taste in every corridor says different. He doesn't move, but the air shifts. Interest arrives like a bird that's decided the hand is steady enough to land on. Go on. I laugh, small and ugly. You want the speech? Fine. The treaty isn't peace, it's a hostage exchange with better lighting. One of yours in our walls, one of ours in yours. We call it protection so our pups sleep. We engrave guest on a collar so mothers can point and whisper. See, there's the reason the wolves don't come at night. We pretend it's trust, and you think it's fear. I don't think it, I say, looking at the map until the ink lines stop pretending they're more than ink. I smell it every time someone says for the good of all and means for the good of ours. I taste it in the communal pot. I watched your alpha grab this. I tap the collar. Because fear loves a handle. The treaty holds because both sides are terrified of the same thing, the shame of admitting they'd rather keep their children safe than their souls clean. He doesn't flinch. Of course he doesn't. But something behind his eyes goes tired in a way that doesn't belong to this morning. You talk like a man who has rehearsed this argument with ghosts. That's the only audience willing to let me finish. He scrubs his thumb along the clean line he left on the vent cover, then looks at the gray streak as if it might confess a secret. And your plan? Pull the treaty's mask off in the middle of the square? Start a fire to show everyone smoke is real? Not a fire, I say. A draft. He waits. Systems pretend to be stronger than people, I continue. But they're built of people's choices. You expose the dependence, the brittleness, the points where everyone is, obeying out of habit and embarrassment, not conviction. Things topple. They don't burn. They embarrass themselves into collapse. You think shame is more explosive than powder. I think a lie dies fastest when it feels ridiculous. He tilts his head. You could die in the attempt. You call it suicide, I say, smiling without humor. I call it freedom of choice. Jude's silence could upholster the chair backs. He uses it like other men use guns. Finally, do you always gamble with the house's dynamite? Only when the house insists it's made of water. He half snorts. It might almost be a laugh if we had the luxury. He walks to the weapons cabinet, unlocks it, and opens the door just enough to check inventory. Not because he thinks I'd steal something with my hands when there's so much, easier to take with my words, but because his order requires these rituals. You've upset the council, he says, still facing the guns. They wanted me to throw you in a cell. You brought me to your office instead. I glance around. Minimalist decor, ascetic personal effects, one map you probably update, yourself, a cabinet you check twice before, and twice after every storm. His shoulders inch in a fraction. You notice too much. That's not a flaw, I say. That's the only reason I'm alive. He shuts the cabinet. The lock clicks with the satisfaction of a habit executed well. He turns and takes me in again. Slower. Something deciding whether to step over a threshold. Tell me exactly what you were doing in the vents, he says. No evasions? So I do. I tell him about the ladder rails worn more on the left than the right. Most right-handed climbers. The draft that shouldn't have been there. An unsealed joint, the way the acoustic changes where the duct passes. Over the council corridor, void below, easy to hear footsteps. I describe where the screws were newer. Recent maintenance, different hand, how. The dust pattern lifted from the grill. Someone wiped from inside last month. I outline paths across roofs, angles of attack and retreat, the small mercies of architecture that exist only because a builder was lazy at the right moment. As I talk, his sternness doesn't soften. It sharpens, attention honed by a lifetime of listening for the detail that saves lives. He moves to the map and with a fingertip tracks what I describe. Where my voice pauses over a decision point, his finger hesitates the way a soldier's foot does when the ground could be wired. Here, he says finally, tapping a junction. You missed something. I rise and stand beside him. The distance is careful. He smells like rain dried off leather and something clean cut beneath it. I missed nothing, I say. but follow his finger. The vents over this stairwell. He slides his nail along a tiny hatch almost hidden in a mass of technical notation. They're old, but the grate's been replaced. If you're looking for a draft, that one will either take you nowhere or exactly where you want. I squint. The hatch is there, a swallowed door. Your architects loved secrets. My predecessors loved redundancies, he says. In case of siege, a beat, or in case someone needed to disappear fast and convincingly, we are very close to admitting we are having the same thought from opposite ends of a uniform. He steps back first. You shouldn't have gone into the ducks. You shouldn't have left them interesting. A flicker. You're infuriating. I'm thorough. I gesture to his desk. And I returned the cover. He finally gestures to the chaos I've made without moving anything. Dust. Disturbed. Screws in a neat line that offends his love of closed loops. You also left my office looking like an autopsy. Don't worry, I say, deadpan. I won't touch your order. It's the only thing keeping you alive. That earns me an actual sound, short, bitten off, halfway between exasperation and reluctant amusement. You realize that's the opposite of reassuring. It's accurate. He circles to the other side of the desk and drops into his chair. The chair sighs the way old wood does when it's relieved to be doing the job it was built for. He steeples his fingers and looks at me for a long moment. The council will insist I put you under closer watch, he says. They'll want to move you to a room without a view and with a guard inside. I prefer windows. They prefer walls. And you? He doesn't answer immediately. The clock on the wall ticks through 3 breaths and a compromise. I prefer results to theater, he says. If I lock you somewhere, you'll make a window. If I give you a little rope, you might not try to strangle yourself with it. Colorful, I say. Do I get a leash long enough to reach the map room again? You get supervised access, he says. With me, that hardly feels like punishment. Don't mistake proximity for lenience, he replies. I want to see what you see, before someone else does. We sit in that for a second. The room smells like old paper and truth, trying to stretch in a chair too small for it. You called the treaty a lie, he says. What do you call what we're doing now? Negotiation, I say. Or foreplay, depending on your sense of humor. The silence that follows has edges. He doesn't blush. Men like him don't. But something like heat walks across his jawline. Quickly, and without admitting it knows my name. You shouldn't joke about that, he says. I joke about cages, so I remember the lock isn't holy. He looks at the map again to give his control something to stare at. If you were in my position, what would you do with you? Give me work, I answer. People with purpose make fewer messes. You make messes as a form of purpose. Then give me one worth cleaning up. His laugh this time is not a sound so much as a breath that chooses to live. He pulls open a drawer and sets a thin folder on the desk, unlabeled. These are maintenance logs for the East Wing. Mark what you think matters. Don't take them out of the room. I take the folder. The paper is warm from its drawer. The ink smells of cheap procurement and expensive consequences. I flip through dates, names, signatures that look too similar across months, someone stamping for someone else. You know the council wanted you in a cell? He says, almost conversational. I know they wanted the appearance of safety. They like appearances, he agrees. They confuse them with outcomes. We reach for the same log at the same time. His hand. Mine. Contact is not dramatic. It is the press of skin to skin in a room where touch has been rationed to need. Our fingers slide over the paper, and for a heartbeat the line of heat where we meet is not invitation or threat. It's recognition. We both let go in the same instant, not because we're afraid of the contact, but because we're not ready to understand what we recognized. He gestures to the chair again, something softer hiding inside the command. Work, Jude says. Order, I answer. And the word for once is not an insult. Thunder arrives before the inspectors do. It unrolls over Sarana like a length of torn velvet, and the fortress stiffens. To meet it, doors latched a little sharper, orders carried a little faster. Someone has decided weather should have competition. By midday, the council's delegation floods the eastern wing like formaldehyde, preserving what should have died a while ago. They move in gray, ledger-eyed, with a pair of clerks who smell like ink and disapproval. Behind them, 2 enforcers from Central Command whose boots have never learned humility. Inspection, the lead says to Jude, who has been waiting in the corridor. Outside my room, arms folded, expression sanded down to polite rock. The man's hair is perfect, in a way that suggests he punishes mirrors for dissent. We've had concerns. You've had concerns since the ink dried on the treaty, Jude says mildly. You'll need a list. We have one. He leafs through a folder with the relish of someone about to be right. Guessed Lael's movements in restricted corridors. Tampering with ventilation. Altercations in the Alpha Hall. An Alpha grabbed his collar. Jude returns just as mild. I don't believe that detail made it into the report, the man says, smile thin as wire. We'll begin with his quarters. Jude glances at me. No orders. No indulgence. Just don't give them a show. I don't intend to. I stand with my hands behind me and watch 6 adults act like the truth might be coaxed out of plaster if they scowl hard enough at a wall. They search like people who already know what they'll find. Bed, wardrobe, the underside of the mattress, the space behind the curtain as if I might keep rebellion folded there, neat with the pleats. It's thorough. It's theater. Here, says one of the enforcers, voice bright with the pleasure of being useful. He crouches by the small trunk at the foot of the bed, the one I use for nothing because it isn't mine, and lifts the lid. Under a folded blanket sits a metal cylinder with taped wires, clean and ugly as intention. The room doesn't even breathe. The inspector's smile widens toward human. Detonator, he announces, like a conjurer finishing a trick. My laugh is a knife that forgot to be polite. You should have scuffed it, I say. New paint looks suspicious in an old trunk. Silence, the enforcer snaps, but the word shakes like someone yanked it too fast out of him. Jude steps forward, the line of his shoulders shifting from politics to work. He crouches beside the trunk and studies the metal with a care that isn't performance. His fingers don't touch anything, his eyes do. Who had the key to this room aside from me? He asks. The clerk blinks. I'm not sure. Find out, Jude says, eyes still on the device. His voice isn't louder. It just ceases to be optional. The inspector clears his throat. Chief Jude, we are grateful for your diligence. Nevertheless, this is clear evidence of intent to sabotage. The treaty stipulates due process, Jude says, straightening. The rain presses at the window, as if it wants to object on my behalf, and it stipulates that anything found in a guest's quarters must be secured in the presence of the overseeing officer. You were present, not when it was planted, Jude replies. A thing like quiet licks the floor. Enough, the inspector says, too quickly. Guest Lael, you are under arrest for espionage and for conspiring to breach the treaty. You will be confined until judgment. I prefer windows, I say. He looks at me like I've mispronounced gratitude. You prefer nothing. You are a convenience wrapped in a collar. Stop talking, one of the enforcers tells me, and reaches for my arm. Jude moves without warning. His hand closes around the man's wrist. His other hand plants on his shoulder and turns him aside with exactly enough pressure to be a lesson and not yet a fight. You will not touch the guest without my order, Jude says, not looking at him, looking at the inspector. You want to charge him? Fine. But you will do it by the book you insist on preaching from. Chief, the inspector says thinly. Rain claps the glass. Thunder gives the hallway a spine. You forget yourself. I remember exactly who I am, Jude says, and exactly who will be writing the next letters to mothers if you keep confusing theater with security. Your Honor, Chief, I say softly, catching his eye, not caring that the room calculated this moment as impossible. It's paper. Like your world. His gaze flicks to me, and something in it cuts, not at me, through something else. Stand down, he says to the enforcers. We proceed by protocol. I'll take him to holding for now. Alone. The inspector wants to object. He almost does. But Jude's version of no is a wall even the rain respects. The man nods. Alone, he echoes, meaning the opposite. You'll be alone if this goes poorly. Jude gestures. I move. The enforcers move to bracket us, then decide against it under the weight of a look they have probably seen in war stories told by men whose names nobody remembers in the capital. We don't go to holding. We go up. The staircase to the roof is a throat, and the fortress is a voice learning how to shout through a storm. Doors shudder in their frames, the stone sweats, and lightning keeps showing Sarana its own bones. When Jude pushes out onto the roof, the sky arranges itself above us. Dark on dark, the kind of blue that dares you to call it black. Wind tries to take the door away. It slams back, offended. Water hits my face like thrown rice. Somewhere below, the city has huddled into itself. Up here, nothing can pretend. Jude walks us to the lee side of a raised parapet, the one that faces the border lights. He looks at me the way a man looks at a riddle and a mirror. You want me to believe you, he says, rain needling his jaw. No, I say, and the word tastes like something I can finally swallow. I want you to stop believing them. He doesn't blink. You're asking me to choose a stranger over a system that keeps my people alive. I'm asking you to call a fear by its name. I gesture at the device they found. Your council plants what it needs to confirm the story it loves. Today it's a detonator. Tomorrow it's my body on a rope and a speech about balance. Balance prevents war. Balance turns into a hanging scale if you feed it lies, I say. The treaty works because both sides have something to lose. Fine. Then stop pretending we built it out of trust. Stop pretending it isn't held together by the thread of mutually assured shame. He looks past me toward the border. Lightning sketches the fence onto the world again, then erases it. His mouth is a hard line of calculation. The inspectors will move fast. They'll turn this into a trial before sunset if I let them. Then don't let them. And do what? The wind takes the question and drags it over the parapet. Spirit you out. Become the man who broke the treaty to save the guest who wanted it broken. Become the man who refused to let a lie pass as law, I say. You like outcomes, you said. What outcome does a staged execution buy you? A war I don't want, he says. A muscle jumps near his temple. Soldiers who die because a counselor wanted a sentence finished. Thunder walks across the roof on iron feet. Between one heartbeat and the next, the door crashes open again. Two figures spill out, enforcers, rain slick, convinced they have the upper hand because they brought a rule and a gun to a storm. By order of the council, one shouts, voice pulled thin by wind. The guest is to be confined to the lower cells. Stand aside, chief. Jude's body angles. Instinct without need of committee. The enforcer steps in, foolish with a kind of courage that grows in men who confuse uniforms for invincibility. He reaches for me. Again. Don't, I say. And the word has teeth. He does. Jude moves. This time, it's not a lesson. It's a verdict. He catches the man's wrist, pivots, and uses his own momentum to fold the enforcer to the wet stone. A blade of movement aligned with gravity. The second man draws. I see the gun clear leather. I see the decision to raise it. I see the wind decide who likes who better. Jude is already there, inside his balance. Forearm slamming the muzzle aside. Shot screaming into rain. Ricochet whining as it meets history in the parapet. My hand finds the first man's shoulder and pins him, as if I have any right to stop anyone from falling. I don't. But my body never asks permission to save itself. Enough, Jude says, louder than thunder because command gets taught in rooms where storms have no say. You fire again on this roof. You make this an incident instead of an error. The enforcer's eyes are wide enough to invite drowning. Jude takes his gun in a grip that allows only one future and strips it. The man staggers back. The other stays down because the world has instructed him to. This is not your arrest, Jude tells them. This is not your decision. Get off my roof. It's not common anymore to see an order land like a weight you can't lift. They go. The door slams. Wind applauds. Rain whistles approval down the parapet. I find myself laughing. Not because this is funny, but because our options just made a collective suicide pact and left us as witnesses. Congratulations, I say. You broke at least 3 internal rules and one counselor's favorite fantasy. He looks at me sidelong. You've got rain in your eyes. I've got rain everywhere. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a roll of oiled canvas, a field cloak designed to offend weather. He flips it open and, without ceremony, drapes it over both of us, pulling me into his leeward shadow. Heat rushes the space between. The cloak snaps in the wind, then settles, turning 2 people into one shape. The storm doesn't get to catalog separately. You know this violates 6 forms and 1 proverb, I say into the small tent made of his chest and stubbornness. You know I hate wet powder, he answers. Fitting, I say. You brought me up here to tell me to keep quiet. I brought you up here so I could hear myself think without a counselor's breath trying to finish my thoughts. We hunch together, the parapet at our backs, the storm trying to be relevant and failing. Under the cloak, the world narrows to warmth and the geometry of trust. You asked what outcome a staged execution buys me, he says, low. It buys the council time to write history. And what do you want to buy? Options, he says. A way to keep my people breathing and your body out of a noose. And if I can't have both, the one that doesn't turn the border into a pyre. You can't keep me, I say, not unkind. Not like this. No, he agrees. But I can refuse to hand you over to a script. He breathes out. It sounds like laying a blade down. You want me to stop believing them. Consider it done. I tilt my head to look up at him. The canvas rubs my collar when I do. Then what? Then we make our own arithmetic. He points with a chin tilt toward the roof line. There's an old hatch above the council stairs, redundant routing. If I were planting something I wanted found, I wouldn't use it, which is exactly why someone did. You think the device is a decoy for a different story. I think the device is a photograph for the minutes, he says. And the story is happening where we aren't looking. Where would you look? He hesitates. Then, maintenance logs. Signatures that repeat. Doors that learn to open for the wrong keys. You already gave me those, I remind him. And you already marked them, he returns. Consider this a lab practical. Lightning curls itself into the horizon like a sleeping animal. The rain slackens to mere insistence. My body, traitor that it is, relaxes into the shape our 2 forms make under the cloak. You know this is trust, I say. I know this is weather and necessity. Coward. He huffs. Pragmatist. We stand there until the bells below remember they can ring without asking the sky's permission. When we move, it's because the plan has decided we're in it. Jude lifts the cloak enough to look me over for cuts I didn't earn. His hand almost touches my face in a gesture that mistakes itself for professionalism. He lets it drop. You'll return to your room, he says, voice back in its uniform. You'll be seen to comply. I'll file a protest regarding procedure and evidence. They'll think I'm trying to cover my own oversight. They'll watch me instead of the logs. And you'll wait, he says. And when the night decides who it belongs to, you'll be ready to show me where the fortress exhales. I smile. It isn't kindness. It isn't cruelty. It's the shape a man's mouth makes when he can feel the cage walls and knows the paint is still drying. You're breaking rules, I say, because someone should mark the moment. You're not worth keeping if all I keep are rules, he answers. Then, softer, the admission a storm pulls out of a man when it's sure. He won't say it anywhere less loud. Don't make me regret this. Don't make me. Under the cloak, we're warm enough to notice it. He folds it back onto his shoulder and the cold takes back ownership. We cross the roof to the door. The fortress swallows us again. But I am not the same shape I was when we climbed the stairs. Neither is he. First hint of trust. It smells like oiled canvas, and the moment after lightning when the dark decides to hold. They read the verdict in a room that likes to imagine itself a courthouse. It's only a corridor with chairs and an elevated platform where the most polished liar gets to sit higher than the rest. The counselor with ledger eyes lifts the paper like it's a holy text and says the words I've been expecting since the day I arrived. Guest Lael, he intones. You are sentenced to death for acts in breach of the treaty, tampering, incitement, espionage. He lists them as if he's ordering lunch, efficient, untroubled. Outside, the bells drag their knuckles across the city at a pace that makes time obedient. Rain has stopped. The air has the scrubbed clean smell of a floor waiting for blood to teach it color. Jude stands to my left, not behind me, as if the geometry matters. He keeps his face in its uniform. Only his hands betray him. Fingers still, knuckles pale, a quiet argument with tendons. When the counselor finishes, the room exhales the way people do when a performance ends, and they can clap. Jude does not clap. Chief Jude, Ledger Eyes says, with the relief of a man who loves protocol because it lets him dodge responsibility. By statute, the overseeing officer carries out the sentence. You will conduct the execution at dusk. Public square. There's a small, greedy pause while he pretends this is solemn. Then, order will be maintained. Jude's nod is a hinge that doesn't creak. Understood. He doesn't look at me when he says it. He looks at the floor. Perhaps because if he looks up, he'll see a man and not a sentence. They put me in a wagon like a parcel that could explode. The interior is wooden, scrubbed, and smells of old straw and new polish. A small grated window opens to a slice of Sarana where streets are suddenly orderly, shutters suddenly brave. People make a corridor for death out of habit. It's a skill city's practice until it looks like respect. Jude climbs in opposite me. The door shuts. The lock closes with an insult. We lurch forward. Silence sits between us first. Not the brittle kind. This one is upholstered, heavy, like the pause before a confession. You still think I'm the enemy? I ask. Because someone has to touch the wire. His eyes find mine. Steady, unkind to himself. I think, he says, you're the only one who hasn't given up. It's not an answer. It's a truce pretending not to be a vow. The wheels hit a rut and the wagon jolts. Our knees knock, not by intention. Outside, voices congregate, then part, then congeal again as the city funnels toward its square. Dusk, I say. They like symmetry. Light dying while the sentence lives. They like theatrics, Jude replies. Do you? I like outcomes, he says. And it's almost a prayer. We don't hold hands. We don't speak promises. He watches me breathe as if cataloging each rise and fall could add them to some ledger the council forgot to balance. Do you want anything? He asks after a minute before. He doesn't finish. A window, I say. But I'll settle for remembering what the sky looked like without floodlights. He almost smiles. Demand noted. We pass the fountain where water keeps trying to make stone kinder. A child on her mother's hip stares through the wagon grate, her eyes two unjudging moons. She drops a red ribbon. It catches on the wagon wheel, flutters, then vanishes beneath. Gone to a future where kids find scraps and call them talismans. Don't make me a martyr, I say softly, because I have to be unreasonable to live with myself. It's a vulgar hobby. Noted, he says again, and the word this time means I'm listening. I'm not done. The square has been cleared and filled in the same motion, bodies pulled into place by rumor, then held there by tradition. In the center, a tall post, not a gallows, because we aren't barbarians. The flag of Talvar hangs above it, the pack's emblem cutting the air into obedient pieces. A spotlight waits on its spindly tripod, bulb the size of an eye. The smell is smoke and old ash, and the metal tang of anticipation. It's not that Sarana has done this often. It's that Sarana knows how. They take me down from the wagon as if dignity can be choreographed. Jude walks one step behind, shoulders operating in the tense economy of a man debt collectors call fate. We mount the platform. Ledger Eyes appears to my right, flanked by the two enforcers who tried to arrest me on the roof and discovered that weather respects Jude more than them. They look like men who have found out their jobs come with risks not listed on recruitment posters. The crowd murmurs, the crowd quiets. The spotlight clicks alive, and the square becomes a stage where all the lines have been rehearsed. Guest Lael, the counselor recites, "You stand condemned for your breach of the peace." Peace, I say under my breath, is a word that wears makeup for funerals. Jude hears me. Of course he does. His mouth doesn't move. His eyes stay on the target no one else can see. And as such, by statute, Ledger Eyes continues, the chief of security will, he gestures, A guard passes Jude a long rifle with a worn stock. The kind men swear by because it has disappointed fewer people than love. Jude takes it, checks it, chambers around. The click of the bolt slapping home runs its knuckles down my spine. A hush ripples out through the square like cloth being set on a table. He steps to the designated mark. The distance between us is a handful of paces and a contract someone wrote before either of us were born. He raises the rifle. The metal finds his shoulder like it's learned him. The muzzle aligns with my chest because ceremonies love symbolism. I close my eyes to give the crowd what they came for. It is kindness, in a way, to let them think death is clean when you obey gravity and a bullet. The square breathes in as one, ribs expanding to fit the moment. Do it, Ledger Eyes whispers, delighted to be near history. I listen instead. To leather creak, to Jude's breath steady, to the tiny snick that means the safety has decided it no longer matters. And beneath all that I hear something almost like a laugh, the one the world makes when a trick is timed right. The rifle reports. The sound is a hammer smashing a cathedral bell. Shock devours my hearing for an instant. The crowd gasps one organism's gasp, but I do not fall, which means someone else does. I open my eyes to see Ledger Eyes blink, surprised, with a hole blooming like a dark flower below his collarbone. He looks insulted, as if the bullet has made a personal faux pas, then folds, a marionette whose strings have been cut by physics. The enforcers freeze between instinct and training. Both are terrible teachers. The smell arrives, powder, hot and chemical, copper, bright and wet, the faint burned hair of a city discovering it is mortal. Screams learn their own grammar. Panic chooses a language it can speak fluently. Jude is already moving. The rifle drops on its strap. His hand finds my collar, not to yank, to anchor, and he pulls me into a crouch behind the post as the square becomes a storm of bodies and orders. Another shot cracks from the far side. Someone's reflex without a target. The spotlight jerks, throws the flag's shadow across the platform like a noose miscast. This way, Jude says into my ear, voice built for commanding chaos to recognize its betters. We don't go down the stairs. We slide behind the banner, into the narrow maintenance hatch whose existence I only know because I spent a week learning how Sarana breathes. Jude kicks the latch. It protests, then remembers his rank and opens. We drop into an access corridor that smells like dust and grievance, and the cheap paint you use when you want to pretend your walls know the difference between before and after. Keep low, he says. His hand doesn't leave my collar. It's a tether, not a leash, and my body understands the difference before my mind admits it. Above us, boots stampede. Commands clash. Someone shouts, "Chief Jude," with the kind of fury that has already drafted its apology. They'll chase you, I say, quick, because speed has its own ethics. Drag you up by your history and call it justice. They'll try, he says evenly. Left. We take the turn past the storeroom where banners sleep between ceremonies, past a rack of folding chairs that have witnessed more endings than weddings. The corridor necks down to a throat. At the far end, a steel door waits with a keyhole that only pretends to like keys. Jude produces one from the inside pocket where his patience also lives, and the door learns how to cooperate. We spill into the alley behind the square, where smoke slumps against the walls like an exhausted guest. People are running in every direction but ours. Panic has poor peripheral vision. Head down, he says. If anyone stops us, I'll smile like a naive man and let you do the lying. You'll keep your mouth shut, he corrects. I do. He leads us through a warren of back lanes where Sarana stores its shame, broken crates, a bucket that used to be holy when water was in it, the skeleton of a market stall. My collar clinks once, a small traitor. He drops his hand to still it. The gesture is as intimate as breathing the same air. The alley spits us into a covered passage that runs under the guild hall. Torches sputter here, embarrassed to be useful in daylight. Where? I ask. To the cistern, he says. It vents near the old watchmakers under the aqueduct. From there out. Out where? The border doesn't just have one side, he says. Move. We move. The city's sounds are a translated text now, meaning survives, grammar changes. The bells have started up again. hysterical with purpose. Shouts braid into a rope that will be used to pull brave men up by their guilt. I picture ledger eyes folding, the neatness of it, the way his blood probably found the cracks between boards and called them geography. There's a part of me that wants to apologize to the wood. Jude stops us beneath a grate where light scribbles down the wall. He listens, the whole animal of him tilted toward useful noise. Satisfied, he prizes it up with a tool that looks like a habit and shoves it aside. The opening is a mouth. We go in. Water runs here, thin and self-important. A narrow vein of the city that believes in gravity more than politics. The tunnel is shouldered brick and damp stone. It smells like time and the residues of lives. We walk ankle deep, then shin deep, then only wet-footed again when the channel widens. My collar knocks the wall once more. Jude winces like it hit bone. Do you want it off? He asks, almost brusque. Now. It's a strange place for tenderness. Not yet, I say. Someone might need to see it still attached to the man walking out. He nods, and that is how we love in Sarana. By agreeing on strategy. At the third bend, the tunnel kinks and rises, and the air stiffens with the smell of old iron. Jude palms another latch. A wedge of cold daylight stabs down. We climb into a cramped culvert at the city's edge, the aqueduct arcing. Above us, like a Roman sentence no one bothered to translate. Beyond it, hills, brush, the dirty green promise of a world that remembers how to be a world without flags. Behind us, the square is a dull roar, the ocean inside a seashell. The wind pulls the smoke flat. Somewhere a voice is already piloting a story toward the harbor where histories stay docked. Jude braces a shoulder to the grating, lets it clank back into place. He looks at me then. Really looks, as if taking inventory will make the rest of this easier. You didn't close your eyes, he says, and it sounds like he's thanking me for something he won't name. I did, I say. Long enough to give them their picture. He huffs, which is as near to a laugh as this day deserves. You're impossible. Improbable, I correct. Today, that's an upgrade. He gestures toward the scrub, the suggestion of a path stitched by the feet of smugglers and shepherds. Go. And you? The question is a hook I can't help but cast. I'm going to stay, he says, and make noise in the right places. Logs, keys, grates that open for the wrong hands. Someone planned this. Someone will try to use your absence to light a bigger fire. A pause. I will not let them. They'll say you executed me, I say. They'll say what keeps them warm at night, he replies. They always do. The air between us is knot and knife and something like mercy. I step closer because you do that to men who choose to stand where the world breaks. I put my hand on his forearm because that is as much as this hour allows without turning us into a different story. If you had missed, I say, absurd, impossible, a joke with teeth, I would have been offended. His mouth curves with a grief that wants to be humor. I don't miss. I know, I say, and let go. He tips his chin toward the hills. Move when the bells start again. People think noise is a crowd's job. Sometimes it's a cover. I nod. We don't say thank you. We have too much left to ruin or build to spend time on words that don't change roads. I crouch, ready to slip into the thorn and stone that will take my skin in honest payment and deliver me elsewhere. The city breathes behind us. The wind shifts, and the smell arrives. Faint, still sharp, powder exhausted. Into air, ash trying to find a home, heat raining itself out. When powder ignites, I say, half to him, half to the world that has insisted. On metaphors, what remains is the smell and the choice of whom it saves. Jude's gaze doesn't flinch. Then choose, he says. I do, and the hills receive me. The border isn't a line. It's a breath the mountains take and then hold, waiting to see who dares exhale first. Mist sifts through the pines, freighting the air with resin and damp earth. Somewhere below, Sarana keeps telling itself the story it can live with. The crowd, dispersed, the square washed, the flag hung back to dry its righteousness. Up here, the world edits more quietly. Wind through needles, a raven's, single remark, the crackle of wood remembering it used to be a tree. The hut is older than law, a roof of patched slate, walls of stubborn timber, a hearth that eats what you give it and thanks you with heat. I found it 2 ridges past the aqueduct, where goat paths knit and unknit into something like intention. The door sulks in its frame. The windows are so small daylight has to petition. I like it. It reminds me that survival is often unseemly. I lay out bandages, water, the little kit I stole from a complacent storeroom, my hands busy so my mind won't eat itself. When the bells start again, for mourning, for order, for practice, I count to 100. Then I open the door. Jude arrives not like a hero, but like a man who refused to die where anyone could tidy him away. He comes out of the gray with the particular sway of someone whose blood has been doing math and losing. His left sleeve is dark from elbow to cuff, his face looks carved by wind and decision. He sees me. He smiles. It's indecent in the best way. You took your time, I say, because tenderness wears sarcasm when it's shy. I brought company, he says, which is his way of saying the wound is not cosmetic. He stumbles once and catches himself on a tree. The bark accepts the confession. I get under his good shoulder and we manage the few steps to the hut together. Up close, the bleeding means what it always means. Not enough. Too much. Urgent. I get him to the pallet by the hearth. He lowers himself as if the floor might take offense. Off, I say, and set about undoing buttons that were designed by men who thought emergencies were theoretical. He doesn't protest. That, more than the blood, tells me how far the tide has gone out. The shirt peels away, sticky. The bandage underneath has soaked through. The cut isn't a bullet, it's a kiss from stone or luck or both, high on the ribs, the kind that bleeds because body does not like being surprised. I wash it with hands that obey when told. He hisses once, then puts his teeth back in their holster. Hold this, I say, pressing a clean cloth into his palm. He complies. We make a temporary religion out of pressure and patience. I stitch what needs stitching, not neatly but with conviction, the way you mend a sail while the storm is still giving advice. At some point, the room tilts. Not the room, Jude. He loses the little color he had and sinks backward, eyes fluttering, breath shuddering into a shallower gear. Stay with me, I say. And the command surprises both of us with how fast it left my mouth. He tries. Of course he does. But bodies are old and proud. They don't always take orders from men who've spent their lives giving them. He fades out in stages, as if the dark prefers foreplay. I clean, bind, tuck, check, as if work itself can barter with whatever calculus blood performs when it decides to stay. When I'm done, the wound looks less like a verdict and more like an argument we can win. I rake the hearth, feed it slats and shavings until fire decides it too prefers outcomes. The first smoke is stubborn. Then the draft remembers how to behave. Heat moves into the hut like an apology. Jude's face relaxes into a version of himself that doesn't have to remember all the orders he didn't want to give. It makes him look younger and more truthful. I sit on the floor near his shoulder and let the quiet come. Outside, mist presses its forehead to the windows. When he wakes, it's to the small domestic sounds, pop of sap, click, of expanding metal, my breathing reminding the room it's not empty. He blinks, locates me, locates himself, locates the fact that he's horizontal and not in uniform. How long, he says, and the words come like someone coaxing a reluctant animal to eat. Long enough to insult the concept of minutes, I reply. Short enough to keep your reputation. He lifts a hand to his side. I bat it away. Don't touch the work. Bossy. Alive, I correct. His gaze slides to the hearth. The fire's grown into itself, calm at the core, busy at the edges. He watches it like a man who keeps count of warmth, because he knows how quickly it can be taken away. Then his eyes drop to my throat. The collar has done its job, announced me, protected them, humiliated us all. It sits there like punctuation that's been misapplied to a sentence trying to tell the truth. May I? He asks. I don't answer immediately. The words have weight in a room this small. Finally, yes. His fingers are careful because they always are when it matters. He finds the hidden clasp, council standard, meant to appear unbreakable, and undoes it with a small click that sounds like metal deciding not to be holy. The band loosens. The skin beneath sighs. I hold the collar for a second. It's just a thing. It's all the things. Then I throw it into the fire. It doesn't scream. It hisses. Oil, old sweat, the ghost of council polish burning off into air. The black metal takes on a red edge, then a duller orange, then a softened slump of shape. The word guest distorts, as if it finally understands the joke was always on it. Jude lets out a breath and tips his head back against the pallet. You broke a rule, he says, voice a scrape that prefers humor. You broke a vow, I say. I'm not cruel about it. Truth isn't punishment if you say it gently. He watches the collar settle into itself. You finally asked instead of ordering. I blink, then snort. You waited 5 chapters to say that? I was busy, he says, and almost smiles, pain making the expression smaller but no less real. We fall into a quiet that isn't empty. The hut holds it. The mountain holds the hut. The world holds the mountain. Sometimes the only miracle available is structure. Will they come? I ask after a while. Eventually, his eyes close for a moment and open again. They'll search the known routes, knock on the usual doors, question the useful people. I left enough noise behind to keep them writing reports for a week. You shot a counselor. I shot history before it could lie to itself, he says, simple as a fact. You'll be called traitor. I've been called worse by better men, he says. And he shifts, grimaces, waits for the pain to announce itself, and go sit in a corner. And some of my people will read the logs you marked. More will notice which keys opened which doors. The story they were trying to stage today will start to look ridiculous. Ridicule kills lies faster than outrage, I say. You said that, and I'm right. He doesn't argue. We eat a little. Flatbread I smuggled in a pocket, dried meat that tastes like someone loved a goat too much to waste it poorly. He drinks water like it has a job, which it does. When the fire has worn itself into a lower octave, I pull a blanket across him and sit with my back to the wall, shoulder almost touching his but not quite. The mist thins, rain negotiates its way down from cloud to roof to earth in deliberate syllables. The hut smells like smoke and resin, and something that wasn't in Sarana, ease. He turns his head. You're free, he says, like a man naming a bird out loud so it doesn't vanish. I don't know what to do with it, I admit. The sentence is a sheet I have to pull back anyway. You'll decide, he says. You're good at decisions other people mistake for accidents. I laugh quietly. High praise from a man who alphabetizes bullets. That's slander, he says. They're organized by caliber. We let that be comedy. It feels indecent and perfect. After a while, I get up and step outside. The pines are taller than war. Mist moves between them like memory that has forgiven but not forgotten. I crouch and press my palm to the damp earth. It's warmer than it looks. It holds. I lay my other hand beside it, not because I need to, but because ritual makes sense of victory. Come, I say. Jude joins me, slow. He kneels, a careful fold of long lines, and sets his hand to the ground next to mine. Our fingers don't touch. The small gaps are a language too. The soil takes both weights without comment. This, I say. A new contract? Not written, he says. Not stamped. Kept, I say. We sit there like men learning how to pray without lying. The rain shifts from sentence to whisper. Somewhere, very far away, a bell tries to tell the mountains what hour it is. The mountains do not care. I breathe. The air goes all the way in without catching. The old scent is still here, powder, faint, a note memory left behind, but it's no longer the first thing. The first thing is petrichor, the green-soaked promise that follows heat's retreat. The world isn't clean, but it is rinsed. It will do. Smell that? I ask. Rain, Jude says. Freedom, I say, and then, because he deserves the truer line, and rain. He makes a sound that might one day grow into a laugh. You'll be insufferable now. I was insufferable before. True, he says. And the word doesn't hurt either of us. We go back inside when the cold starts collecting on bones. He lies down with the obedience of a body that understands rest. I sit at his side, my palm on the floor, feeling the heartbeat of a hut that has held other fugitives, other bargains, other beginnings. The collar hisses in the last of the firelight, and then decides to be ash. Outside, the storm has finished talking. The quiet that follows is not a vacuum. It's a promise you can hear if you learned how to listen in places where hearing used to be a luxury. The powder smell has gone thin, a footnote in air already rewriting itself. The rain, our rain, does the rest. The valley doesn't remember the war. Or maybe it just chooses better memories. The mountains taper down into soft hills here, folded with pastures and small rivers that never learn to rush. The village at their base is a scatter of roofs. Red tile, gray slate, whatever the wind didn't steal last winter. The air after rain smells green and sweet, like the world keeps forgiving itself. Jude has decided to repair the roof of the house we borrowed from time. He climbs the ladder with the steady impatience of a man who doesn't trust gravity but has made peace with it. His bandaged side twinges now and then, but he pretends it's nothing. The hammer in his hand punctuates the afternoon, solid, rhythmic, alive. Below, I sit on a stool outside, surrounded by 3 children and a chalkboard that has survived several regimes. The youngest one miswrites the letter R, turns it backward. I don't correct him immediately. I like that he's invented a new alphabet for a better world. Again, I say. And he tries, tongue out, concentration fierce. The others giggle. Somewhere behind us, a goat adds its opinion to the lesson. It feels like democracy. Jude calls down, "If you let them teach you instead, we might end up with functional spelling." I shade my eyes to look up. "If you burn the house down, we'll end up spelling fire by demonstration." "Optimist," he says, and swings the hammer again. The older woman next door brings bread sometimes, still warm from her oven. The children trade berries for stories. The rain trades thunder for quiet. Everything has learned barter, even peace. When the roof finally stops leaking, Jude climbs down, wiping sweat with the hem of his shirt. There's sawdust on his arms, and the faint copper of old scars catches the light. He looks less like the man who used to salute orders and more like someone learning how to exist without permission. "You smell like smoke," I tell him. He sniffs his sleeve. "You burn breakfast again?" "I was experimenting." "With what?" "Time management," I say, and hand him the half-charred bread. He bites it, grimaces, and shrugs. "At least it doesn't smell like gunpowder." "That's the spirit," I say. "We're making progress." He sits beside me on the step. The kids scatter, chasing something invisible and important. The horizon still holds a mist where the mountains begin. The world beyond them looks patient. We don't talk about Sarana. The city will write its own endings. Maybe someone found the logs we marked, the truth we planted like a mine that blooms into understanding instead of death. Or maybe it's still pretending. Either way, that's its story now, not ours. Jude leans back on his hands and closes his eyes. "Listen," he says. I do. There's the soft crackle of a hearth, the splash of a cartwheel on a muddy road, a child's laugh, no sirens, no bells trying to remind the sky what hour it is. Just the ordinary orchestra of life that refuses to be magnificent. "I always thought gunpowder smelled like death," I say after a while. He opens one eye. "And now? Now I think it was just waiting for someone to breathe life into it." He nods, the kind of agreement that doesn't need more words. The rain starts again, light and deliberate. It finds the new roof, the fields, our shoulders. It smells like beginning.